Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are here to really process the densest, most transformative information, giving you that shortcut to being truly well-informed. And today, we are grappling with one of the most powerful and I'd say demanding books ever written, Viktor E. Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Mm-hmm. Demanding is right.
Yeah, and we're not just looking at, a historical text here. We're looking at the foundation of a whole psychological theory, logotherapy.
Right.
Which was literally forged in, well, the most extreme circumstances humanity has probably ever known. Frankl started as a psychiatrist, but then he became a concentration camp prisoner.
Yeah.
And in doing that, he turned the absolute worst possible human experience into this ultimate laboratory for understanding the human will, for understanding resilience.
And that direct, almost unthinkable context is it's absolutely essential for understanding what he's getting at today. Our source material really pulls from both parts of his work, right? Part one is that searing memoir, his survival in Auschwitz and Dachau. And then part two is where he lays out logotherapy more formally.
It's so rare, isn't it, to have a psychological theory that's so fundamentally, well, validated by that kind of direct existential suffering.
Exactly. It wasn't developed in a lab or an academic setting primarily. It came straight from lived, horrifying experience.
So, okay, for our listener today, what's the core mission? We've got this incredible and intense work in front of us. Where are we focusing this deep dive?
Our goal, really, is to extract the functional mechanics of logotherapy. How does it work? We need to understand, in pretty granular detail, how meaning and purpose are almost engineered by the human mind.
Engineered?
Yeah.
Interesting word.
Yeah, because Frankl saw it as the ultimate source of resilience. We're targeting the kind of knowledge that fundamentally transforms how you perceive suffering, how you perceive external constraints. The focus isn't just on the history, the terrible history of the camps.
No.
But on the enduring psychological truth Frankl uncovered there about human strength.
Okay, and this brings us straight to that core paradox, the thing we really have to wrestle with throughout this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
How can a book that details, the systematic destruction of human life, written about unimaginable cruelty and loss, how can that book also be one of the most powerful guides to discovering purpose in, ordinary, maybe even comfortable modern life? How does The Abyss offer illumination?
Well, I think it's because Frankl refused to see the concentration camp only as a place of death and destruction. He used it almost clinically as a test case for the human spirit.
A test case.
Yeah. He observed who lived, sure, but maybe more importantly, he observed how people chose to face their suffering, even their death. And the insights he drew from that choice, that internal decision, that forms the entire architecture of logotherapy. It's built on that foundation of observed resilience.
Okay, let's dig into that foundation then. Section 1, the crucible of experience.
Yeah.
So let's unpack the groundwork Frankl laid in part 1. He immerses us in that crucible of experience, the concentration camp environment. And the source material is clear. It's defined by unimaginable suffering, loss, and dehumanization.
Absolutely. The whole system was designed precisely to strip prisoners of everything, their identity, their dignity, their sense of agency, gone. Systematically. And psychologically, this stripping process, it followed clear phases, which Frankl actually documented meticulously. The first phase was shock.
Shock, right, the initial arrival.
Exactly. During the transport trains, the initial selection process on arrival, the shock was so complete, so overwhelming that it created this kind of temporary barrier, a numbness.
Like a defense mechanism.
Almost, yeah. It actually prevented immediate mass suicide, in a way. The mind and body were just focused solely on the basic immediate survival facts. Where's the electrified wire? Where are the guards? Where's the gas chamber everyone whispers about? But this shock, the source's night, it quickly gave way to the second phase, which was arguably even more dangerous psychologically.
That was apathy.
Precisely. Apathy. It became the necessary emotional self-defense mechanism. You had to become numb to survive the constant, overwhelming horror day in, day out.
You couldn't possibly process it all.
No. The men became numb. Frankl describes watching others die or being brutalized, often with this detached indifference. You had to save every scrap of emotional energy just for your own survival.
So things like disgust or horror or even normal fear, they just faded.
They faded or were suppressed, yeah. Their inner life, their focus narrowed drastically down to the bare biological necessities. The next watery soup, the next crust of potentially moldy bread, avoiding the capo's random violence, judging the distance to the next forced labor site.
So the system was incredibly effective at stripping away almost everything external and even a lot of the internal emotional landscape. But, and this is the crucial point, Frankl made that singular observation, the one that became the bedrock of logotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
What was that internal territory? That space, the guards, the system, could never fully conquer.
It was what he famously called the last of the human freedoms.
The last freedom.
Yeah. The ability, even when facing total external control, absolute powerlessness, to choose one's attitude toward any given set of circumstances, he saw it. Even in the utter nakedness of existence, and I mean literally naked during selections for the gas chambers, some prisoners, maybe a resilient minority, but some, they retained this inner freedom.
Wow.
They possessed a kind of psychological space, an inner citadel, where the external brutality just couldn't fully penetrate.
That idea. Inner freedom in a place of literal physical imprisonment.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, but also counterintuitive. How did he actually see this? How did it manifest in, like, concrete actions? It couldn't have been big protests or anything.
No, not at all. It wasn't about grand, heroic gestures, usually. It was often in the smallest things. The conscious decision, moment by moment, to choose their response.
That's okay.
It might be deciding to offer a word of comfort to another prisoner, even if it costs you precious energy you needed for yourself. It might be choosing to share that last tiny, pathetic piece of bread with a friend who was fading.
Tiny acts of humanity.
Tiny, defiant acts. Or choosing to cultivate an inner spiritual life. Maybe forcing yourself to notice the beauty in a sunset over the barbed wire, or intensely recalling the face of a loved one, holding on to that image with fierce emotional focus. The detailed focus here from the source is that even in extreme pain, humans can choose their response and find meaning in suffering.
So these small choices were like assertions.
Yes.
Assertions of their spiritual identity against the dehumanizing force.
Exactly. They weren't choosing what happened to them that was totally imposed, but they were choosing who they would be while it was happening. They were choosing their internal moral stance, their attitude.
Wow.
And Frankl didn't just observe this. He correlated this choice, this inner attitude, directly with physical survival. He noted a direct, observable connection between having a sense of purpose and simply enduring.
Really? A direct link?
Yeah. Prisoners who found or held on to some kind of meaning, maybe it was a scientific manuscript they felt compelled to reconstruct in their heads, or an unshakable religious faith, or, very commonly, the vivid image of a spouse or child waiting for them back home, these individuals were significantly more likely to endure the immense physical hardship.
They had a reason to endure. A why.
Precisely. He quotes Nietzsche, right? He who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. This goes way beyond just psychological resilience as we might think of it. It suggests that purpose, that meaning, was almost a measurable factor in physical survival itself.
That's incredible. And the flip side?
The reverse was tragically precise as he observed it. Frankl noted that those who lost hope often perished quickly, just gave up.
Gave up internally.
Internally first, then physically. And often he saw this loss of hope crystallize around a specific date. He describes how men who clung to a rumor, a promise of liberation by a certain date, say Christmas or New Year's, and then that date passed and freedom didn't come.
Yeah.
Sometimes they would just seem to collapse inwardly. They'd stop fighting the typhus, stop trying to eat the miserable rations, refuse to get up, and they'd often be dead within days.
Wow. So you're contrasting that slow, grinding physical degradation the Nazis imposed with this sudden internal, almost spiritual decision to surrender.
Exactly. Hope wasn't just a nice feeling in the camps. It was, in a very real sense, life-saving medicine. The will to live was tied directly to the will to meaning.
Okay, this is intense stuff, but it brings us to the crucial bridge, back to the listener, back to us now. We're talking about the systematic horrors of the camps, and obviously we need to handle any analogy to modern life with extreme care. But if Frankl observed this incredible capacity for choice, for inner freedom, under the greatest external constraint imaginable, what does that imply about the choices available to you listening now in maybe comfortable, but often stressful and complex modern life?
Well, I think it implies a profound, maybe even uncomfortable, moral imperative for us.
Okay.
In the camps, the external constraints, starvation, beatings, constant threat of death, they were 100% real, totally overwhelming. Yet, Frankl argues, he proved through observation, that the internal freedom to define one's attitude remained 100% immune to those constraints. Immune. So in modern life, we often allow perceived constraints, maybe information overload, career frustrations, financial worries, relationship difficulties. We allow these things to overwhelm our internal freedom. We let them dictate our sense of meaning or lack thereof. We fall into that feeling of pointlessness, that existential vacuum we're going to talk about.
So the lesson isn't, oh, my daily problems are as bad as Auschwitz. That would be obscene.
Absolutely not. That's not the point at all.
The lesson is, if that core human freedom, that choice of attitude, survives the absolute worst conditions imaginable, then we maybe need to question how readily we blame our circumstances, our environment, for our own lack of meaning or purpose today.
Precisely. We might be fundamentally squandering that freedom. If a person can find spiritual purpose, can choose dignity in the midst of hell on earth, then we have very little excuse, relatively speaking, to claim our lack of purpose is purely an environmental problem, something outside of our control.
Right. It forces the responsibility back inside.
Yes. That pivot from focusing only on external suffering to recognizing the power of the internal chosen response, that's the monumental legacy of the camp narrative, and it leads directly into logotherapy itself.
Okay, so that pivot from observing survival mechanisms to building a formal psychological theory, that's a transition into part 2 of the book, and into logotherapy proper. Let's formally introduce it. It's defined, simply enough, as a form of psychotherapy centered on finding purpose in life.
Right. And the name itself is key, isn't it? Logos. It's the Greek word for meaning, purpose, or reason. So logotherapy is literally healing through meaning.
Healing through meaning.
Yeah. Frankl developed this approach systematically after his liberation, realizing that if meaning was the ultimate survival mechanism he witnessed, then it must be the core driver of a healthy, fulfilling life outside the camps, too.
And this immediately set it apart, didn't it, from the big psychological schools that were dominant at the time, especially Freudian psychoanalysis and Adlerian psychology, which Frankl himself was initially trained in.
Oh, absolutely. He position logotherapy by directly challenging their core ideas about human motivation. Freud, of course, famously centered his theory on the will to pleasure, the driving force of the libido, seeking gratification, avoiding pain.
The pleasure principle.
Exactly. Then you had Alfred Adler, focusing on the will to power, that drive for superiority, for competence, for overcoming feelings of inferiority. Frankl looked at both and said, no, those are important, but they're secondary.
Secondary to what?
Secondary to our primary, most fundamental human drive, the will to meaning, the innate human striving to find a purpose for our existence.
So if the will to meaning is primary, number one, what happens when people don't find it? Or when they pursue pleasure or power instead of meaning? Did Frankl have a kind of diagnosis for that state?
He absolutely did. And this is where his crucial concept of the existential vacuum comes in.
The existential vacuum sounds empty.
It is. He believed that when that primary drive for meaning is frustrated, when it's blocked or neglected, the individual experiences this inner void, this vacuum. And they often try to compensate to fill that emptiness by frantically pursuing pleasure or maybe accumulating material wealth or seeking status and power over others.
Ah, so those pursuits become symptoms.
Exactly. Symptoms of the underlying vacuum, not healthy goals in themselves. He saw them as temporary fillers, distractions. The vacuum itself is characterized by feelings of profound boredom, a sense of aimlessness, apathy, and ultimately the feeling that nothing really matters.
That sounds incredibly familiar. Almost like a diagnosis for a lot of modern affluent societies, doesn't it? Where basic material needs are often met, sometimes excessively so, but spiritual or existential needs are kind of left behind.
It really feels like the diagnosis of our time in many ways.
Yeah.
The existential vacuum is arguably the central psychological ailment that logotherapy seeks to address. If a person is, drowning in material comfort but suffering from this deep gnawing meaninglessness, logotherapy helps them see the problem isn't usually external deprivation.
Right.
It's the internal frustration of that primary fundamental will to meaning.
Okay. Now let's get to the absolute core, the central thesis. That definitive statement that really cuts through everything else in his theory. You quoted it earlier, but let's unpack it. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose.
Yeah, that statement is designed to provoke, I think, because it completely reframes the source of our deepest suffering. Frankl is arguing that the pain of circumstances, no matter how severe, how terrible, is actually manageable, or at least bearable. As long as one can find a meaning in it, integrate that suffering into a larger why. It's when the pain, the hardship, is seen as pointless, as random and senseless, that's when it becomes truly unbearable. So the harsh circumstances themselves are secondary. The real threat to our endurance, our ability to cope, is that catastrophic internal state, the meaning vacuum.
Okay, I hear that, the idea that circumstances are secondary to our internal state. But let's push on this a bit, because it's a hard idea. How does Frankl reconcile that with the reality that some external circumstances like, say, extreme poverty, systemic injustice, inescapable chronic illness, they seem to fundamentally erode a person's ability to even look for meaning?
Yeah.
Isn't there a real risk here of sounding like you're blaming the victim if you suggest meaning is always available no matter how crushing the environment?
That's a really critical question, and logotherapy has to have an answer for it. Otherwise, it does risk sounding dismissive of real hardship. Frankel's answer, I think, is nuanced, and it's rooted directly back in his camp experience.
Okay.
He is absolutely not saying that systemic hardship, injustice, or terrible illness are irrelevant or acceptable. Not at all. He fought against injustice his whole life. What he is saying is that even the most crushing external hardship cannot eliminate that final, irreducible core of human freedom, the freedom of attitude.
Back to that core freedom.
Back to that. Logotherapy doesn't minimize the pain or the injustice. Instead, it aims to empower the individual to decide how they will respond to that injustice or pain. It prevents the external situation from stealing not just their resources or health, but also their spiritual dignity, their inner stance. It focuses on the psychological response, which is the only thing ultimately immune to external force.
So the meaning isn't found in the terrible circumstance itself, but in the chosen response to it, in the defiance, the courage, the attitude.
Precisely, and that leads us directly to the first key principle you mentioned, meaning under all circumstances.
Right. Tell us more about that.
It's the foundational belief. Life has meaning, or at least the potential for meaning, under absolutely all circumstances, even in suffering, even in guilt, even up to the final moment of life. This principle is like the ultimate reassurance.
How so?
Because it directly counters that pervasive cultural idea that meaning is something you only find, or maybe only deserve, during the good times when you're successful, happy, healthy. Frankl insists, no, meaning is always there, waiting to be discovered or created, regardless of your personal tragedy, your failures, or your social standing. It's inherent in the state of being human.
Okay, that's a powerful counter-narrative. Now, the third key principle you mentioned brings us back to that most actionable idea from his camp experience, the freedom of attitude.
Yes, and we really have to keep reiterating this point because it's the most practical tool in the logotherapy toolkit, the thing you can actually use. We always have the freedom to choose our attitude toward any situation, no matter how constrained we feel externally.
Always, even when we feel completely trapped.
Even then, the feeling of being trapped might be overwhelming, but the capacity to choose your inner stance remains. And Frankl actually developed specific therapeutic techniques based on leveraging this freedom.
Like what? Could you give an example?
Sure. One is called paradoxical intention. This is where a patient, maybe someone with a phobia or obsessive thoughts, is encouraged to actively wish for the very thing they fear, sometimes even with defiant humor.
Wish for it. That sounds paradoxical.
Exactly. By intentionally embracing the feared thing or the symptom, you assert your internal freedom over it. You detach from the fear by, in a sense, mastering it through intention. Another technique is dereflection.
Dereflection.
Yeah. This aims to redirect the patient's attention away from obsessive self-focus, often hyper-focus on achieving happiness or pleasure or avoiding symptoms, and directs them outward, towards the unique meaning waiting for them outside themselves, in the world, in tasks, in other people.
So pulling the focus away from the self and onto potential meaning.
Onto the world and its demands, yes. Both techniques are basically mechanisms designed to help people exercise that inner freedom of attitude, to realize they aren't just puppets of their circumstances or their neuroses.
It really does seem to transform the individual, doesn't it? From potentially feeling like a victim of circumstance into feeling like a responsible agent, someone responding to a unique call or task.
That's exactly the shift logotherapy aims for. Responsibility is key.
Okay, so logotherapy isn't just describing the human condition then. It's really offering a kind of manual, isn't it? Frankl didn't just say, go find meaning. He actually outlined 3 concrete, actionable ways, 3 paths to discover it.
Yes, these 3 paths are the practical blueprint. They're for the listener who maybe recognizes they're facing that existential vacuum we talked about, or perhaps just seeking greater depth and purpose in their life. These are the avenues Frankl identified.
Right. The first path is maybe the most straightforward one, the one we often think of, work or creation. Finding purpose through doing something significant, through contribution, creativity, achieving a goal.
Exactly. This path recognizes our fundamental human need to, make a mark, to contribute something unique. Meaning is found in the work itself, in the deed done. It might be professional excellence in your job, or building something tangible with your hands, or creating art or scientific discovery. It's the fulfillment that comes from realizing a unique potential or bringing value into the world through concrete action, what you do.
Makes sense. Okay, the second path is through love or encounter. This is finding purpose through selfless connection and devotion to another individual, or maybe even a broader cause.
Yes. For Frankl, love is perhaps the ultimate vehicle for discovering meaning. Why? Because in loving another person, truly seeing them, you grasp their unique potential, their essence.
You see the best in them.
You see the best, and you help actualize their unique being through your loving perception. And in that selfless act of focusing on another, your own life takes on essential meaning. It draws you out of yourself. He believed that in the moment of deep love or profound encounter with another being, we see meaning most clearly because we momentarily transcend our own self-absorption.
That's beautiful. Okay, now the third path. This is the one that I think demands the most profound shift in perspective for many people, and that's suffering, finding purpose in pain. This is where logotherapy really stakes its most radical claim, isn't it?
Absolutely is. And we need to dive deep here because it's so easily misunderstood. Frankl is crystal clear. He is not suggesting we should seek out pain or suffering. That would be masochistic. But he is insisting that we acknowledge suffering is an unavoidable, inherent part of human existence. It's part of our destiny, woven into the fabric of life, sickness, loss, failure, ultimately death. If we cannot change an inevitable, unavoidable circumstance, the death of a loved one, a debilitating diagnosis, a major societal crisis, then the only option left, if we want to avoid despair, is to change ourselves, to choose our response, our attitude toward that suffering.
Okay. But how does that pain, that deep, maybe terrible, unavoidable pain, actually become meaningful? Where does the meaning come from? It's not in the pain itself, surely?
No, the meaning is never in the pain itself. The meaning arises from how we bear it. The suffering is transformed into a kind of personal growth, into meaning, only when the attitude toward that suffering is chosen deliberately. Often this involves courage, dignity, defiance, or finding a way to serve others even amidst one's own pain. Defiance against despair, yes. Frankl argued that if a person can hold on to their human dignity, their integrity, their compassion, while enduring inescapable suffering, they achieve a kind of supreme spiritual victory. They make the suffering meaningful through their response. The source material puts it very directly. Purpose transforms pain into personal growth. The meaning isn't in the anguish itself. The meaning is in the human triumph over that anguish. It's the ultimate exercise of that inner freedom we keep coming back to.
So unavoidable suffering becomes an opportunity for a unique kind of achievement. The achievement of changing oneself for the better, finding strength you didn't know you had, thereby giving dignity to the endurance itself, and confirming the human spirit can be stronger than fate.
Precisely. It forces you or allows you to access a deeper, perhaps spiritual part of yourself that turns out to be entirely independent of your external circumstances, your health, your comfort. This is the core of what Frankl called tragic optimism.
Tragic optimism.
Yeah. The ability to maintain hope and find meaning precisely because of life's tragic triad, unavoidable suffering, inescapable human guilt, and the certainty of death, not just in spite of them. Those very limitations become the backdrop against which meaning can shine most brightly.
Wow. Okay, let's try to synthesize the big lessons here. The two major pillars that seem to emerge from logotherapy are pretty clear now. First, meaning gives life, strength, resilience, especially amid suffering.
Yes, absolutely foundational.
And second, no one, no circumstance can take away your inner freedom to choose your attitude.
Those are the bedrock insights. And they aren't just, abstract philosophical ideas. They are clinical observations validated by Frankl's own survival and his work with patients. They're foundational truths for building a resilient life.
There's one more piece, the single most profound takeaway, maybe. The one that really reverses the standard paradigm of how we seek happiness or fulfillment in the modern world. You called it the critical perspective reversal earlier.
Yes. This, for me, is the game changer in logotherapy. It fundamentally alters the entire relationship an individual has with their own life.
Oh, so?
It's the ultimate rejection of what you might call the entitlement mindset. We are so often culturally conditioned, implicitly or explicitly, to ask the question, what do I expect from life?
Yeah, that sounds familiar. What's in it for me?
What does life owe me? What job, what relationship, what experience, what level of happiness will finally satisfy me? This frames the individual as a kind of passive claimant, waiting for life to deliver fulfillment.
And Frankl argues that this is completely the wrong question to be asking.
Completely the wrong question. He argues that the correct question, the productive question, the question that actually unlocks meaning is the reverse. What does life expect from me?
Wow. Okay, let's just let that sink in for a second. What does life expect from me? That is the absolute opposite of almost every self-help philosophy out there today, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a radical reorientation, a philosophical and psychological U-turn. When you start asking, what does life expect of me? Your focus immediately shifts. It shifts away from navel-gazing introspection about personal gratification.
Right.
And shifts outward, toward action, toward contribution, toward responsibility. It demands that you recognize you aren't just here on Earth to consume happiness or experiences. You're here to respond to the unique demands that life is placing on your specific shoulders right now.
What demands?
It could be anything. The specific task that needs doing, the loved one who needs your care right now, the unique insight or talent only you can contribute to a situation, the suffering that you are called upon to bear with dignity. It's about listening for life's questions directed at you.
So it turns the individual from being a passive consumer of life's potential benefits into an active, responsible agent who has a duty to fulfill life's expectations, to answer life's call.
Exactly. And that fulfillment, that sense of responsibility, that sense of being needed, of having a unique task, that is where true, resilient meaning is unlocked, according to Frankl. You stop waiting passively for meaning to arrive, like a package on your doorstep.
Yeah.
And you start actively seeking out the demands, the tasks, the responsibilities that life is currently placing upon you, big or small. This sense of being irreplaceable in one's responsibilities, even seemingly minor ones, is the true antidote, the true prophylactic against that gnawing existential vacuum.
This whole deep dive into Frankl's work,
Yeah.
it's just so powerful, isn't it? Because it offers this message of resilience and hope and purpose that feels genuinely timeless. It manages to take the absolute darkest human experience imaginable and extract from it a practical guide for living a more meaningful life.
It really does.
And crucially, it provides a framework not just for handling major crises, but also for navigating the daily disappointments, the complex challenges, the moments of doubt that we all face.
And we've established pretty clearly that the concept of inner freedom, that choice of attitude, is the absolute bedrock of logotherapy. So even as you, the listener, are processing this profound, maybe sometimes overwhelming information we've discussed, you still maintain that fundamental freedom to choose your attitude toward it. You could choose to feel overwhelmed by the darkness Frankl described, focusing only on the horror, or you can choose to be empowered by the immense, defiant light he managed to find within that darkness, the potential for meaning he insists is always there.
That choice applies even to how we process this knowledge itself. Okay, which brings us then to the final provocative thought we want to leave you with today. Something to mull over, to carry forward into your week.
Yeah. So if Frankl proved, through the most brutal testing ground imaginable, that every single individual, no matter how constrained, no matter how desperate, possesses this fundamental, irreducible freedom to find meaning, to choose their stance even in the darkest times.
Okay.
Then what specific responsibility does that inherent freedom impose on your decisions right now, today? When, for most of us listening, the light is shining, relatively speaking, when you have relative comfort, safety, opportunity. If you possess this profound power of choice, a power literally validated in the crucible of the concentration camps, what specific demand is life currently placing upon you? What task, what relationship, what challenge is calling for your unique attitude, your purposeful action right now? What is the meaning waiting for you to fulfill?
What does life expect from you today? A question definitely worth carrying with you. We really hope this deep dive helps you start finding your own answer.